Why was Burke awake that early morning? How did he know details that were never made public? And why did the police ignore his connection to the room where it all happened? Today, we'll reveal 5 concrete facts, ignored, omitted, or forgotten, that could directly link Burke to the crime scene. The mirror was there, small in the hallway bathroom, and for years no one cleaned it. It wasn't broken, just fogged, as if the house itself was afraid to look at its own reflection clearly. That night when the police entered, all eyes were on JonBené, but there was another presence in the house, quieter, more contained, almost invisible. Burke, the older brother. He was never accused, never formally treated as a suspect, but he was always there, and that's exactly what unsettles. His presence has no place in the official narrative, but it exists in details too small to be accidental. Why was he awake that early morning? How did he know things no one told him? Why did the police turn away from something as obvious as his connection to the room where it all happened? Today we're going to lay these details out on the table, not to point fingers, but to do what no one has dared to do until now. Piece together the fragments that have always been in plain sight. 5 facts, all real, all documented, all ignored, and one clue that no one could explain. Not the experts, not the parents, not Burke. This isn't theory, it's accumulated silence, and what we do with it could change everything. Maybe the scariest thing in this case isn't the crime, it's the ease with which the world chose not to see. Because looking at Burke means facing what we've always avoided. That danger doesn't just come from outside. Sometimes it shares Christmas dinner. The pain here isn't in the missing evidence. It's in the evidence that was ignored, in the questions no one asked because they seem too dangerous. This video won't accuse, but it won't pretend everything's fine either. It will do what no one has done until now. Open the door to that room and ask why Burke walked through it and no one followed. You're going to hear 5 facts, and when the last one lands, maybe the mirror will be a little clearer. If you've always felt something was missing in this case, this video is for you. And if this truly touches you, you know where we'll meet, in the reflection. Imagine walking through a house where everything has been carefully rearranged, as if the previous night never happened. Dishes cleaned in the sink, toys picked up, curtains open to let the sun in, but there's one place, one single place, no one touched. A room, a basement, a scene frozen in time. JonBenét's room was more than a child's space. It was the stage of a mystery surrounded by versions, ransom notes, half-truths. And even with so many eyes on it, everyone seemed to avoid the same question. Who else passed through there that night? Burke, the brother, was quietly removed from the narrative in the early days. Instead of being included as a relevant witness, after all, he lived in the house, he was isolated. For protection, they said, but protecting who exactly? Him or the family's image? In the files, his name appears as someone who slept soundly, but investigators found a dirty spoon with pineapple residue in the kitchen, a bowl placed carefully, as if someone had gone back to eat after everything. And in Burke's scattered words years later, there are slips, details he shouldn't have known, and others he seemed to avoid with rehearsed care. In the Dr. Phil interview, the world saw a strange, out-of-place smile, the kind of reaction that doesn't match the topic. I was asleep, he said, but his eyes, those eyes seemed to tell something else. Not a confession, but a deep discomfort, an internal effort to keep the mirror's reflection fogged. Some neighbors reported seeing lights on in the early morning, hearing footsteps, and a side door to the house was unlocked. Unusual for such a cautious household. And yet, none of this made headlines. The media embraced the parents. The newspapers seemed to follow the same script. A devastated family, a senseless tragedy, a monster out there. But something didn't add up. The police themselves knew it. So much so that, for a while, they held internal hypotheses that never reached the public. Among them, that the intruder story was, at the very least, flimsy. Burke remained invisible, but it was an invisibility that echoed. His behavior in the days following the crime was described as strangely stable. He ate cereal, played with Lego, avoided questions. One investigator even said, "It's like he erased that night from his memory, or learned not to talk about it before understanding what might happen if he did." Silence. That was the pact between parents, media, and an entire community willing to keep up appearances. After all, the Ramseys were well known, like that fall into scandal. The collective impulse is to clean everything up as fast as possible, except what can't be cleaned, because you can wipe down the furniture, You can wash the clothes, you can even paint the walls. But there's one thing bleach can't erase: the energy of a room that knows too much. And if there was a presence there, awake, moving through the house, maybe hearing something downstairs, it was set aside for convenience, not for lack of questions, but for fear of the answers. Burke grew up with this, and so did the world, ignoring the signs, keeping the mirror fogged. But every time we revisit the facts, however small, the reflection gets clearer. We can't see everything yet, but we can't pretend there's nothing there anymore either. Sometimes the truth doesn't arrive as a shout. It comes as an accumulation of details too small to draw attention on their own. But when placed side by side, they change everything. The first fact is simple, and at the same time, disturbing. Burke said he was asleep the entire early morning, that he heard nothing, saw nothing. But later, in another interview, he let slip, "I heard my mom scream." When confronted, he tried to backtrack, as if he'd said something he shouldn't. The phrase hung in the air, and with it, the doubt. How did he hear the scream if he was asleep? Then came the pineapple. It seems trivial, but the dirty spoon with fruit residue was in the bowl on the kitchen table. JonBenét's had traces of the same food in her stomach, and according to the parents, she would never have woken up to eat. But Burke liked pineapple, and the spoon had fingerprint marks, never thoroughly analyzed. Why didn't the police follow this lead? On the counter, a flashlight, heavy, out of place. According to a forensic expert, it had the exact weight and shape to cause a specific type of skull injury, the same type found on JonBenét's. It was a household item, no visible fingerprints, as if someone had wiped it down in a hurry or in fear. These three details were there from the start, but they were tucked away under the label of unimportant. And then came the fourth element, not physical, emotional. Burke's smile, frozen, ill-timed, an attempt to seem normal while talking about his sister's death. He laughed, avoided eye contact, tapped his fingers on the table, said he remembered little, but remembered in detail going to play the next day, as if nothing had happened, as if it were all a distant memory, not a real trauma. This behavior was analyzed by experts. Some said it was just a defense mechanism, others that the boy was carrying something he couldn't process. But the most delicate point was still to come. The fifth fact isn't exactly evidence. It's a void, a space between what was said and what could never be asked. They call it dissociation, when the mind distances itself from reality to endure what would be unbearable if fully experienced. Burke, at 9 years old, might have seen something or done something and blocked it out, not as a lie, but as survival. In one of the least analyzed parts of the Dr. Phil interview, he talks about how he dealt with his parents after the crime. He says, "They were sad. I tried to be happy to help." But that statement reveals something deeper. A boy who understood, far too early, that his role was to protect what was left of the family, even if, to do so, he had to erase his own pain or his own guilt. That's where it all comes together. The room, the spoon, the changed story, the out-of-place smile. These aren't accusations. They're shadows cast over the same spot in the house, the room where JonBenét's was found. And if these shadows don't come from outside, then they come from within. Maybe Burke will never be able to tell what happened there. Maybe he himself doesn't know anymore, because there are traumas that time doesn't heal. It just erases from conscious memory, but the body keeps it. The eyes reveal it. The silence weighs. And when we look at all this together, one question becomes impossible to ignore. What if the only witness is someone who will never be able to tell what they saw in the mirror? Sometimes what holds us back isn't the fear of the truth. It's the fear of accepting that it was always right in front of us. And still, no one had the courage to face it. Some things only those who've lived them understand, and others, even those who live them, can't explain. The room is still there, untouched on official paper, but alive in the memory of those who paid attention. On the house's floor plan, it's just another room. But in the story, and in the conscience of those who followed it all, that room became a scar. When we piece together the 5 facts I showed you, the fog starts to lift. A step here, a poorly chosen phrase there, the muffled sound of a forgotten detail. All of it reveals an outline. It's not a perfect image, but it's enough to unsettle. And for many, unsettling is already too much. Now think with me. If the boy was awake, if he knew about the pineapple, the flashlight, the early morning, if his reactions on camera seem more rehearsed than emotional, what are we really seeing? A child traumatized by something he witnessed? Or someone who grew up knowing that carrying silence was safer than telling the truth? The truth didn't come in a note. It's not in a confession, but it shows up in the eyes and in the silences. And in this case, the silences screamed. Did the parents protect? Maybe. Did the police cover up? Possibly. Was the media complicit? Definitely. But there's one point that can't be ignored. The truth started to vanish inside the house itself. There, where everyone says love lives, but where sometimes fear hides too. And then, the mirror. The one we've used as a symbol from the start. It never lied. It just got fogged. On purpose. The question is, now that it's starting to clear, will we have the courage to look straight at it? The resolution here isn't legal. It doesn't come with a verdict. What you've received so far is something more dangerous. The right to see. And once you see, there's no unseeing. Some will still say none of this proves anything. And maybe they're right, technically, but emotionally, humanly, you know what you felt, and so do I. Now it's up to you. What do you do with this vision that's been unlocked? Will you turn your face away again? Will you wipe the mirror to fog it up? Like someone who prefers the comfort of doubt to the weight of clarity? Or will you let this reflection linger with you a while longer, even if it keeps you up at night? The truth, even incomplete, has a kind of presence that refuses to be ignored. And from now on, it doesn't just live in that room. It lives in your gaze. Sometimes what hurts isn't what was done, it's what was ignored. That phrase has been pounding in my head since I started putting this script together. Because at its core, that's what the JonBenét's case represents to me. A series of ignorances that became convenient. Ignoring Burke's behavior, ignoring the part of the house no one wanted to talk about, ignoring the 5 facts that were there, waiting for someone to piece them together with courage, ignoring the mirror. But if you made it this far, it's because you didn't ignore. And I need to tell you something, with all the honesty in the world, that puts you in a different place. Because most people close their eyes when the truth starts to hurt. You didn't. And that in itself changes everything. Because now, when someone says, "No one ever found any connection between Burke and the room," you'll know that's not true. And what you do with that determines whether the mirror stays fogged or not. You clean the mirror. Now it sees you too. But what if this fog we just waded through is only the beginning? Because there's a detail few noticed in the first 24 hours after the crime, and it could change everything again. Sometimes the truth doesn't arrive as a shout, it comes as an uncomfortable whisper. And once you hear it, you can't pretend you didn't. What we saw together here wasn't a theory. It was 5 pieces of a story that were always on the table, but no one wanted to connect. Because connecting those dots is like cleaning the mirror. You start to see a reflection you don't want to admit. And that's where the unease lives. Because maybe what's scary but the fact that so many preferred to keep the mirror fogged. For years, JonBenét's story was told like a broken fairy tale, with a castle, a party, glitz, and a tragedy no one explained properly. But when we stop looking at the fantasy and start looking at the house's reflection, at the behavior, the silence, the contradictions, the magic fades. And what's left is what always unsettled. The room, the brother, the gestures, the flashlight, real life. I'm not here to say Burke is guilty, and honestly, maybe he isn't, but that doesn't change what we saw. And it doesn't change what lingered after. Why did the silence always protect the same direction? What weighs on me most after telling all this is realizing how much the truth is less about evidence and more about courage. Courage to ask, courage to hear what no one says, courage to accept that sometimes danger lives in what we call home. We don't want to look at the older brother because he's a child, because he's family, because he has that smile that doesn't fit with grief. But when everything points to the same room, the same object, the same emotional absence, pretending none of it matters is choosing the comfort of ignorance, and I refuse to do that. That's why this video exists. Not to judge, but to say it's long past time we stop pretending we didn't see anything. It's long past time to face the mirror. And if you made it this far, maybe you have that courage too. Now, before I let you go, I need to tell you something that still haunts me. The day after the crime, the family's actions weren't of mourning, they were of theater. And there's a specific gesture, a forgotten phrase, that few noticed. But when you look at it closely with the mirror a bit clearer, it takes on new weight. And maybe in that gesture lies part of the missing answer. In the next video, I want to take you to that moment, the day after, when the spotlights were already set up, but the script was still fragile. I'll show you who cried, who smiled, who stayed silent, and what was said that almost no one noticed. If you felt this video truly touched you, provoked you, or made you think differently, then I invite you to follow me on this journey. Subscribe to the channel, not as someone who just wants to keep up, as someone who chooses to see. And if you feel, like I do, that this case deserves to be told with truth, with courage, without filters, leave your mark. Write in the comments a phrase only those who were here will understand. I clean the mirror, and I don't look away. It might seem like just a phrase, but to me, it's the kind of gesture that shows who truly felt what was said here, who stayed, who saw, and who had the courage to see with their own eyes. And if this story hit you in a deeper way, if at any moment you paused, breathed, and thought, this has never been said like this, then maybe it's time to do more than watch. The super chat is there, but not as casual support. It's a sign, a silent seal that this story deserves to keep being told, that you were here and it didn't go unnoticed, that you believe hard truths need a voice too. Those who send a super chat here aren't just viewers. They're part of this story. They're the ones who say, I saw and I won't look away anymore. Now, I want to know what this awakened in you. After all this, what was the point that hit you hardest? The one that kept resonating even after the video? Leave your vision there. It can be just a line, but let it be true. Because some things only those who've lived them understand. And in this video, you didn't just listen. You were here. If it hurt, it's because it still matters. And remember, the mirror is still here, and it can still show more. If you're ready, I'll keep waiting for you in the next reflection.